The mining vessel Horizon drifted through the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. Captain James stood on the bridge, watching his crew extract rare minerals from a massive rock. Everything seemed normal until Lieutenant Kate noticed something unusual on her screens. "Captain, we're being scanned," she said, her fingers dancing across the console. "But this isn't any human technology." The scan felt wrong. It penetrated through the ship's hull, through their equipment, through their bodies. Every crew member felt it a cold, invasive presence, examining them like specimens under a microscope. The scan lasted 30 seconds, but it felt like hours. Then came the message. Not through their communication systems, but directly into their minds. The Vex Empire had found them. These aliens had been watching Earth for years, studying humanity from afar. Now they had decided humans were too primitive, too emotional, too dangerous to exist. "Your species has been evaluated," the cold voice echoed in everyone's head. "You lack the discipline for galactic citizenship. Your emotional responses make you unstable. Your tendency toward violence makes you a threat. Termination protocols will commence in 7 planetary rotations." Captain James felt something change in that moment. Not fear, but something deeper. The scan had violated them, judged them, condemned them. And the aliens had made a fatal error. They had given humanity a warning. Back on Earth, the message spread instantly. Every human had heard it, felt it. World leaders gathered. Scientists analyzed the scan's data trail. Military commanders dusted off old contingency plans. But it wasn't just the governments that responded. In a garage in Texas, Tom, a retired engineer, started building something from scrap metal. In Tokyo, a group of gamers began running simulations. In Moscow, a grandmother taught her grandchildren an old family recipe for explosives. Humanity didn't panic. They prepared. The Vex expected fear. They expected surrender or desperate, chaotic resistance. They had studied hundreds of species, and all had reacted predictably to their ultimatum. But humans were different. The scan had touched something primal in them, something the Vex's analysis had completely missed. Dr. Wilson at MIT made the first breakthrough. The scan had left traces quantum signatures that revealed how Vex technology worked. Within hours, every university on Earth was sharing data. Competition turned to cooperation. Old enemies became allies. Humanity had 1 week, and they would use every second. The Vex Armada assembled at the edge of the solar system, confident in their superiority. Their ships were massive, powered by dark energy, armed with weapons that could crack planets. They had conquered 1,000 worlds. Earth would be just another footnote in their empire's history. But as Commander Vac reviewed the latest surveillance data, something bothered him. Earth's response was ... unusual. No panic in the streets. No mass evacuations. Instead, there was movement organized, purposeful, almost eager. Humans were building things, but not shelters. They were creating something else. "Sir," his subordinate reported, "the humans are launching objects into space. Thousands of them. But they're not ships or weapons we could identify." Vac dismissed the concern. Primitive species often made desperate attempts at resistance. None had ever succeeded. The Vex had studied humanity thoroughly. They knew about human wars, their weapons, their capabilities. The scan had revealed everything. Or so they thought. What the scan had actually done was unite 8 billion humans with a single purpose. It had given them a common enemy. It had triggered something the Vex's analysis couldn't quantify: human spite, human creativity, and most dangerously, human determination to prove someone wrong. As the 7 days ticked down, Earth grew quieter. Not with fear, but with anticipation. The objects launched into space took positions throughout the solar system. Factories that had made cars now produced something else. Children learned new games that were actually training. Everyone had a role. Captain James and the Horizon crew hadn't fled. They stayed in the asteroid belt, mining furiously. But they weren't extracting minerals anymore. They were placing something inside each asteroid, something small but significant. The countdown reached its final day. The Vex Armada began its approach, expecting to find a terrified world begging for mercy. They would find something very different. Asterisk. The Vex Armada moved through space like a storm cloud of metal and energy. 500 ships, each one large enough to level cities, approached Earth in perfect formation. Commander Vax sat in his command center, watching the blue planet grow larger on his screens. "Begin the termination sequence," he ordered. His voice carried no emotion. This was just another cleansing, another primitive world to be erased. But as the weapons powered up, something strange happened. Every piece of debris in Earth's orbit, old satellites, space junk, even abandoned stations, suddenly came alive. They weren't debris at all. They were mines hidden in plain sight. The first explosion caught the lead ship off guard. Then another, and another. Within seconds, space around Earth became a deadly fireworks show. The Vex shields held, but barely. "Primitive tricks," Vac muttered. "Continue the advance." That's when the asteroids started moving. Throughout the solar system, thousands of asteroids changed course. Not randomly, but with purpose. Each one had been fitted with engines by Captain James and crews like his. They weren't weapons. They were battering rams, guided by humans who had spent the week calculating perfect trajectories. On Earth, a teenager named Mike sat in his bedroom, controlling 3 asteroids through a modified gaming console. His high score in space simulators had earned him this job. Across the world, millions of others did the same. Humanity had turned warfare into the ultimate multiplayer game. The Vex computers struggled to track so many objects. Their advanced AI, designed for tactical warfare, couldn't comprehend the chaotic yet coordinated assault. It was like trying to stop a swarm of angry bees with a sword. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission," a Vex officer announced. The message was simple. "Broadcast by President Roberts from Earth. You scanned us without permission. You judged us without knowing us. Now learn what humans do to bullies." The real surprise came next. The harmless radio waves Earth had been broadcasting for over a century. TV shows, music, random signals suddenly became focused. Every antenna on Earth, every satellite dish, every radio tower turned toward the Vex fleet and transmitted. At maximum power, the signals were still harmless to the ships, but they overwhelmed the Vex communication systems. The aliens found themselves drowning in human culture. Game shows, rock music, children's cartoons, all blasting at volumes that made coordination impossible. The Vex tried to filter it out, but humans kept changing frequencies, modulating signals, adding new layers of chaos. Dr. Wilson's team had discovered that Vex technology relied on quantum entanglement for instant communication. So they did something insane. They entangled particles with the Vex systems and fed them contradictory information. Every Vex computer started receiving orders that made no sense. Attack yourself. Defend the enemy. Turn left and right simultaneously. In the confusion, smaller human ships emerged from hiding places behind the moon. They weren't military vessels, but modified cargo ships, cruise liners, even rich people's yachts. Each one had been fitted with a special weapon developed in the past week. The weapon was beautifully simple. The Vex shields were designed to stop energy and projectiles, but they couldn't stop everything. So humans had weaponized something basic: water. Compressed into tiny pellets and fired at near light speed, frozen water became deadly projectiles that confused Vex sensors. Was it a weapon or just debris? The shields couldn't decide fast enough, but the masterstroke came from an unexpected source. Anna, a microbiologist in Sweden, had noticed something in the scan data. The Vex were terrified of biological contamination. Their sterile ships had no defense against bacteria or viruses. So, humanity's response included launching capsules filled with harmless but rapidly multiplying bacteria, kind used to make yogurt, beer, and cheese. When these hit Vex ships, they spread through ventilation systems. The bacteria didn't hurt the Vex, but their immune systems went into overdrive. Suddenly, the superior aliens were sneezing, itching, and thoroughly distracted. Commander Vac watched his organized armada descend into chaos. Ships collided trying to avoid asteroids. Weapons fired randomly as computers glitched. Crew members scratched frantically at imaginary contamination. The inferior humans had turned space into a carnival of confusion. How? He demanded. We scanned them. We knew their capabilities. His science officer responded weakly, between sneezes. Sir, they're not using their known capabilities. They single quotes improvising. That word sent chills through Vac. The Vex had conquered civilizations that followed predictable patterns. But humans weren't following any pattern. They were making it up as they went, turning weaknesses into strengths, chaos into strategy. The 7-day deadline had passed. But it wasn't Earth that was in danger anymore. Asterisk. Commander Vac ordered a tactical retreat to regroup. This should have been simple: move back, reorganize, and attack again. But humans had other plans. Every time a Vex ship tried to retreat, they found their navigation systems displaying recipes for banana bread. Dr. Wilson's team had discovered that Vex computers, while advanced, processed information sequentially. So they flooded them with useless data disguised as critical commands. Meanwhile, the asteroid bombardment continued. But now came Phase 2 of humanity's plan. The asteroids weren't just kinetic weapons, they were delivery systems. As they shattered against Vex shields, they released clouds of glitter. Simple, harmless glitter, but mixed with metallic particles that stuck to everything. The Vex ships sparkled like disco balls, which would have been merely embarrassing, if not for what came next. The glitter conducted electricity, not enough to damage systems, but enough to create false readings on every sensor. Suddenly, Vex ships couldn't tell if they were under attack or just detecting sparkles. On the bridge of his flagship, Commander Vac tried to restore order. Ignore the distractions. Focus on... He stopped mid-sentence as music started playing through the ship's speakers. Not just any music. Never Gonna Give You Up by Rick Astley. Humanity had literally rick-rolled an alien invasion, but the music masked something more serious. Hidden in the audio frequencies were commands that interfaced with Vex systems. The aliens' own scanning technology had created a two-way connection, and humans had figured out how to use it. Back on Earth, in a bunker beneath Nevada, General Anderson coordinated the real counterattack. Phase 3, people. Let's show them what happens when you threaten our home. The thousands of objects humanity had launched weren't just decoys. They were pieces of a giant mirror array, each one perfectly positioned. When they activated together, they focused sunlight into concentrated beams. Not enough to destroy Vex ships, but enough to blind their sensors and heat their hulls uncomfortably. The Vex, who came from a cold, dark region of space, found the sudden heat disturbing. Their ship's cooling systems, designed for the cold void, struggled to compensate. It was like forcing someone from Antarctica to suddenly stand in the Sahara Desert. But humanity's greatest weapon was just activating. Remember Tom, the retired engineer from Texas? He hadn't been building a weapon. He'd been building a transmitter one that could broadcast human emotions directly into Vex minds. The Vex had dismissed human emotions as weakness. They hadn't realized these emotions were also strength. Tom's device collected the feelings of every human on Earth, their defiance, their hope, their stubborn refusal to give up, and transmitted them directly to the Vex. For beings who had suppressed emotion for millennia, the sensation was overwhelming. They felt fear for the first time in generations. They felt doubt. They felt what humans felt when threatened, the burning desire to protect home and family. Some Vex ships simply stopped, their crews too overwhelmed to function. Others began firing on empty space, seeing threats that existed only in their suddenly emotional minds. A few even started arguing among themselves, something that hadn't happened in Vex society for thousands of years. Lieutenant Kate, still aboard the Horizon, watched her screens with satisfaction. "Captain, their formation is completely broken. They're in full panic mode." Captain James nodded. "Send the message." The message went out to the Vex fleet, this time in their own language, which humans had decoded from the scan data. "You gave us 7 days. We only needed 6. The 7th day we reserved for this lesson. Never scanned humanity without permission." But the real shock came when the Vex tried to call for reinforcements. The quantum communication system they relied on had been completely corrupted. Instead of sending military data, it was transmitting everything humanity had fed into it: memes, cat videos, cooking shows, and billions of spam emails about extending car warranties. The mighty Vex Empire, which communicated instantly across galaxies, was reduced to shouting at each other across space. Their technological superiority had become their weakness. "Commander." Vac looked at his failing armada and made a decision that no Vex commander had made in 10,000 years. He opened a direct channel to Earth, not to threaten, but to negotiate. "Humans," he began, his voice shaking with unfamiliar emotion. "We ... miscalculated," President Roberts responded, trying not to laugh at the glitter-covered alien ship on her screen. "Yes, you did. You scanned us and found our weaknesses. But you missed our strength. We're really, really good at being annoying when someone threatens us." The Vex had triggered humanity's deadliest response. Creative chaos. Commander Vac's request for negotiation hung in space between the fleets. But humanity wasn't done teaching lessons. "Before we talk," President Roberts said, "you need to understand something. You threatened to exterminate us based on one scan. So we're going to show you what you missed." Every human ship suddenly went dark. The asteroids stopped moving. The transmission of emotions ceased. For a moment, the Vex thought they had won, that humanity had exhausted its resources. Then something new appeared on their sensors. Ships. Not the converted cargo vessels from before, but actual warships. They emerged from behind Jupiter, from beneath Mars's polar ice, from hidden bases on the moon. Humanity had been hiding their real fleet the entire time. These weren't primitive vessels. In the past week, using knowledge gained from the scan, humans had built something extraordinary. They had reverse-engineered Vex technology and improved it with human creativity. Admiral Chun commanded the lead warship, Persistence. "All ships. Show them configuration 7. The human fleet moved in patterns that seemed random but weren't. They were recreating the movements of a murmuration, the way birds flock together, each ship responding instantly to its neighbors. The Vex computers, designed for logical warfare, couldn't predict the organic patterns, but the real surprise was the weapon these ships carried. Humans hadn't built planet crackers or antimatter bombs. They had built something far more terrifying to the Vex empathy projectors. Using the emotional transmission technology at massive scale, each human ship could make nearby Vex experience human memories. Not just emotions, but full experiences. The love of a parent for a child. The joy of a sunset. The pain of loss. The triumph of achievement. When the projectors activated, Vex soldiers across the Armada suddenly understood what they had tried to destroy. They saw Earth through human eyes, not as a primitive world, but as a home. They felt what it meant to have something worth dying to protect. Several Vex ships actually switched sides. their crews overcome by the desire to protect rather than destroy. Others simply shut down, their operators too conflicted to continue. The perfect, emotionless Vex society crumbled in minutes. Commander Vac himself was hit with the memory of a human grandmother baking cookies for her grandchildren. Such a simple act, but filled with more warmth than anything in Vex culture. He found himself crying another thing the Vex hadn't done in millennia. "Stop," he broadcast to both fleets. "Please, stop." But there was one more surprise coming. Remember those capsules of bacteria humanity had launched? They weren't random. Anna and her team had programmed them with a specific purpose. The bacteria were now spelling out messages on the Vex hulls, visible to their sensors. "We could have been friends, and you started this, and most prominently, say sorry." The Vex Empire had never apologized to anyone. They were superior. They were logical. They were ... wrong. Commander Vac did something unprecedented. He appeared on video communication, his gray face streaked with tears, glitter still sparkling on his uniform. "Humans of Earth, the Vex Empire formally apologizes. We scanned without consent. We judged without understanding. We threatened without cause." President Roberts nodded, but wasn't satisfied. And double quotes Vac struggled with words that had no equivalent in his language. "We were jerks." The translator had apparently learned some informal Earth terminology. "Now," Roberts continued, "about that scan. You violated every person on Earth. That technology needs to be restricted." What followed was the galaxy's strangest negotiation. Humans demanded the Vex disable their scanning technology on any world with sentient life. In return, humans would stop the emotional broadcasts and remove the bacteria, though the glitter was permanent. Humanity insisted on that as a reminder. But the most unusual demand came from Mike, the teenager who had controlled asteroids. Speaking through the president, he said, "You have to play our video games. If you want to understand humanity, start there. Learn what it means to fail and try again, to work with others, to have fun." The Vex agreed, though they didn't understand why this was important. Within hours, the first Vex human gaming session began. Commander Vac himself joined a raid in an online game, username GlitterAlien001. He died 17 times in the first hour and rage quit twice. He finally understood human frustration and determination. Other Vex discovered cooking shows and became obsessed with food they couldn't eat. Some found social media and started arguing about whether hot dogs were sandwiches. The Empire's most logical beings were becoming wonderfully, chaotically human. The invasion hadn't just failed, it had backfired spectacularly. Asterisk. 6 months after the failed invasion, the galaxy had changed forever. Word of humanity's defense spread through quantum networks that the Vex hadn't completely corrupted, though occasionally alien civilizations still received random cat videos. The Galactic Council, which had ignored Earth as too primitive, called an emergency session. The ancient elders, beings of pure energy, materialized in their chamber for the first time in eons. The humans did what? Elder Prima asked, his glow flickering with disbelief. They defeated the Vex Empire with memes and glitter. Council Secretary Theta reported, trying to understand the words coming from his own mouth. The recording of the battle, played before the assembled representatives of 1,000 worlds. They watched in stunned silence as humanity turned chaos into strategy, weakness into strength, and actually made the emotionless Vex cry. "We must classify Earth as a level 10 threat," suggested the representative from the warrior clans of Orion. "Level 10? They don't even have faster-than-light travel," protested the silicon-based intelligence collective. Elder Prima raised a glowing appendage for silence. "Perhaps we need a new classification. Earth is not a military threat in the traditional sense. There's something else entirely." The term they eventually settled on was chaotic good nightmare. Earth was officially designated as approach with extreme caution and explicit permission. But the real change was in how other species began approaching Earth. Instead of invasion fleets, they sent friend requests. The Zephyr merchants wanted to trade for human entertainment. The crystal mines sought human creativity consultants. Even the Void Watchers, who hadn't communicated with anyone in a millennium, sent a simple message: teach us your memes. Earth became the galaxy's most unlikely diplomatic hub. Not through strength or technology, but through sheer unpredictability and a strange ability to make friends with anyone, even former enemies. Commander Vac, now Earth's first Vex ambassador, stood before the United Nations. The glitter had been mostly cleaned off, though he kept some on his uniform as a badge of honor. He said, "Fellow beings," he began, "having learned human forms of address, the Vex Empire proposes a formal alliance with Earth. We offer our technology, our knowledge, our protection. And in return?" President Roberts asked, though she was smiling. "You teach us to be ... human. Not literally," he added quickly, "but to understand what you have that we lost. Joy, creativity, ability to find humor in the darkest moments." The alliance was approved unanimously, though with conditions. Earth insisted on establishing the Galactic Consent Protocol: no scanning, probing, or analyzing any species without written permission in triplicate, notarized, and accompanied by a gift basket. Captain James and the crew of the Horizon became the first human explorers officially welcomed in Vex space. They were treated like celebrities, though James had to stop his crew from teaching the Vex too many Earth pranks. "Remember," he told Lieutenant Kate as she showed a young Vex engineer something called a whoopee cushion. "We're ambassadors now. Come on, Captain," Kate grinned. "They rick-rolled themselves yesterday. They're learning." The galaxy watched in amazement as the Vex Empire transformed. Their ships still sparkled with residual glitter, but now by choice. Their rigid hierarchy loosened as they learned about democracy through online gaming guilds. They even established their first entertainment broadcast, a cooking show where Vex attempted to make human food they couldn't taste, judged by humans via video link. But the most significant change was in how the galaxy viewed humanity. Earth became known as the do not mess with planet. Not because humans would destroy you, but because they would do something far worse. They would confuse you, frustrate you, and somehow make you their friend in the process. A famous quote spread through the galactic networks, attributed to a Vex philosopher who had spent too much time on human internet. To defeat humans in war is impossible, not because they are strong, but because they will turn war into something else entirely. They will make you question why you're fighting while pelting you with glitter and sending cookies to your mother. The scan that was meant to mark humanity's end had instead announced their arrival on the galactic stage. Earth's defense became required study in military academies, though no one could quite figure out how to replicate it. "Don't try to copy Earth's strategy," advised Grand Admiral Zor of the warrior clans. "There is no strategy. There is only human." And so humanity took its place among the stars, not as conquerors or subjects, but as the galaxy's wild card. The species you absolutely didn't want as enemies, definitely wanted as friends, and never, ever scanned without permission. The end. Asterisk.